Snow fell in lazy, slow-motion flakes, like someone shaking powdered sugar over the street. The cul-de-sac was quiet, except for the hum of furnace vents and the faint rhythm of someone's wind chimes 2 doors down. Laura stood at her kitchen counter, a spool of red ribbon in her hand, tying one final bow around a plate of sugar cookies. Each plate looked identical, 6 cookies, neatly wrapped in cellophane, a small card that read, "Happy Holidays, from our family to yours." She'd made them for her neighbors, her sister, her mom, even her mom's church friend who always called her the quiet one. It wasn't much, just cookies, but it was her way of keeping the peace. 5:57 p.m., December 24th. The oven light glowed behind her, a dim orange square in the fading winter light. She crouched down, checking the last batch. Too brown on the edges. She frowned, closing the door softly. "You'd think after 20 years I'd know how long to leave them," she murmured. Behind her, the kitchen timer blinked 0.0. The house smelled like butter and vanilla, but it also smelled faintly of nerves, that tight, electric feeling that always settled in her stomach before family gatherings. She glanced up at the clock again, then at the half-empty bottle of red sugar sprinkles. She'd wanted to do green too, but she'd run out. Typical. The phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with Mom. Laura exhaled through her nose before answering. "Hi, Mom." Her mother's voice was brisk, efficient, like always. "Just checking you're on your way soon. Don't forget, 6 o'clock sharp at Megan's." "I know," Laura said. "Just finishing up the cookies." "Oh, honey," her mom sighed in that practiced tone, halfway between amusement and disapproval. "We all agreed, no gifts this year. Remember?" Laura stared down at the plate in front of her. The delicate bows, the neat handwriting. "They're not gifts, just cookies." Her mother said. "The way people do when they've already dismissed you. Well, you know how your sister is. She'll feel bad if you bring anything." Laura's throat tightened. That's never been true, she thought. Megan never feels bad about anything, but out loud she just said, "I'll see you soon." Her mom's voice softened just slightly. "Drive safe, honey." Then the line went dead. Laura set the phone down carefully, like it might crack under pressure. She turned back to the counter and tugged the last ribbon tighter. The loops were uneven, one side drooping lower than the other. She snipped the end clean with her kitchen scissors. That phrase, "we all agreed," echoed in her head. It was Mom's favorite kind of truth. The kind that really meant, she decided. She brushed crumbs off the counter and reached for her scarf, folding it twice around her neck. She moved quietly through the house, checking things the way she always did before leaving. Oven off, lights off, thermostat down 1 degree. In the hallway mirror, her reflection looked back at her. Tidy hair, light makeup, small silver earrings. She practiced a smile, then let it fade. By the door, she slipped on her boots, the kind with faint salt lines from last week's snowstorm. Her son's gloves, small, blue, frayed at the cuffs, sat in a basket near the stairs. She grabbed them for him, even though he always forgot to wear them. The living room was still and warm. The string of white lights across the window flickered once. A bulb had gone out near the end. She noticed it immediately, that tiny imperfection no one else ever would. She paused in the doorway, letting her gaze sweep over the small house, the sofa draped with her son's blanket, the stack of unpaid bills under the fruit bowl, the crooked star on their modest tree. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Outside, the snow had thickened. Her old sedan was dusted white, like someone had sifted flour over it. She brushed the windshield with her sleeve, the cold biting her fingertips. As she opened the car door, the interior light flicked on, dim and yellow. She caught her reflection in the window, tired, polite, hopeful. The same expression she'd worn every Christmas Eve for the past 10 years. She thought about the text her sister had sent earlier that morning. "Megan, excited for tonight? Mom says keep it simple this year. Simple." Always simple for Megan, the younger one, the favorite, the golden daughter. Married, with 2 kids who had everything. Laura's son, Ethan, had asked that morning if they were doing presents. She'd said, "No, honey. Grandma said we're keeping it fair this year." He'd nodded, quiet, but his eyes had dimmed. He was only 9, but already he'd learned that fair didn't always mean equal. She placed the plates of cookies carefully on the passenger seat, using a folded towel to keep them from sliding. "No gifts," she whispered, the words half a laugh, half a sigh. As she backed out of the driveway, the headlights lit up the snowflakes like falling ash. She turned the radio down low. Old Christmas songs humming softly, familiar and worn. The street lamps flickered past, one by one, until she reached the main road. The windshield wipers thumped a slow rhythm, and for a moment, she thought about turning around, skipping the whole thing. But she didn't. She never did. At the red light near the church, she glanced at the time, 5:21 p.m., plenty early. She took a deep breath, then another, steadying herself. Every year she told herself the same thing. Maybe this time will be different. Maybe Mom wouldn't make those little jokes about her job. Maybe Megan wouldn't give Ethan that pitying look. Maybe, just maybe, they'd all feel like equals for once. The light turned green. Laura pressed the gas gently, the car gliding forward through the quiet, white evening. Behind her, the porch light back home flickered once, then went dark, that one burnt-out bulb finally giving up. She didn't notice. Not yet, but it would be waiting for her later. A small, silent reminder of everything she gave and everything no one saw. Megan's house looked like a Hallmark commercial, warm light glowing through frosted windows. A wreath so perfectly symmetrical it could have been measured with a ruler. Even from the driveway, Laura could smell cinnamon and butter, and somewhere inside, the faint pop of a champagne cork. Evan pressed his mittened hands against the car window. "They already started," he said. His voice was small. Laura forced a smile. "They're just excited." "Come on, grab the cookies." Inside, the noise hit her first. Laughter, shrill and overlapping, the kind that fills every corner of a room. The living room was a carnival of reds and golds, wrapping paper everywhere like fallen confetti. Megan stood near the tree in a cream sweater, glass of champagne in hand, her hair styled in soft waves that looked effortless, which meant it took at least an hour. "Laura." Her mother's voice called out from the couch. "There you are! We were just saying you must have gotten caught in the snow. Hi." "Mom?" Laura said, slipping off her boots and stepping inside. The plate of cookies balanced carefully in her hands. Megan turned, her smile wide and gleaming. "Oh, you made cookies." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Laura said. "It's just a little something." "Oh, honey, you're too much," Megan said. Though her tone wasn't admiration, it was amusement. Like she was humoring a child who'd drawn something uneven but sweet. Evan hovered near her leg, his cheeks flushed from the cold. The twins, Megan's kids, Chloe and Ryan, sat on the floor surrounded by shiny boxes and torn ribbons, their faces bright with excitement. Laura's gaze caught on the glossy Apple logo stamped on one of the boxes. Another lay open beside it, white and sleek, Apple watches. 2 of them. "Wow," their mother cooed. "Aren't they lucky?" Megan waved her hand, mock dismissive. "Just little somethings. You know, Santa couldn't help himself." Their mom laughed, that same soft, practiced laugh that filled the room like perfume. "We all said no gifts, remember?" She teased, but she was smiling. The twins giggled, tearing open another set of boxes. Evan stared, his hands still clutching the plastic-wrapped cookie plate. Laura felt her chest tighten. The sound of wrapping paper, the sharp tear, the crinkle, hit her like static in her ears. It filled the spaces between laughter and clinking glasses. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to look down at her napkin, pressing her fingers against the paper until crumbs stuck to her skin. "They're beautiful gifts," she managed. "Oh, please," Megan said lightly. "You know how kids are. They've been saving their allowance for months. That was a lie, of course." Laura didn't even think the twins had an allowance. Mom raised her glass. "Well, they deserve it. They're such good kids." Then turning to Evan, "And how about you, sweetheart?" Excited for Santa tonight? Evan hesitated, looking at Laura first as if checking the rules. I think so, he said finally. He smiled, polite and small. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Laura wanted to gather him close, to whisper something to make it better. But instead she reached for another napkin, folded it neatly, and took a slow sip of water. Across the table, Megan's husband, Mark, was helping the twins set up their new watches, pairing them with their matching iPhones. The screens glowed bright in the dim room, reflecting off their wide eyes. Look, it tracks your steps, Chloe shouted, already running in place. Ryan laughed, showing his wrist to his grandmother. Oh, how clever, Mom said. Technology these days. Laura's pulse quickened. She looked around at the glittering tree, the perfect ornaments, the endless paper littering the carpet. For a moment it all blurred, red and gold and white, like the world had become noise and color without shape. We all agreed, she thought. We all agreed, Mom said. Her mind repeated it, each word like a tap of a hammer. Megan caught her glance, gave her a quick shrug, then mouthed something that looked like, "Don't be mad." Laura almost laughed. Mad? No, she wasn't mad. Mad was too loud for what she felt. She felt hollow. The kind of quiet ache that starts in your stomach and moves up, slowly, until it sits behind your eyes. Evan was sitting still now, his cookie plate on his lap. One of the cookies had cracked under the plastic, a neat diagonal line through a smiling snowman face. He looked at it for a moment before whispering, "Can I give these to Grandma?" "Sure," Laura said softly. "Go ahead." He stood, carrying them to the table. Mom smiled, accepting the plate with a distracted, "Oh, thank you, sweetheart," before setting them near the edge, half covered by napkins. The twins laughed again, shouting over each other about screen brightness and step goals. Laura leaned back in her chair, staring at the crumbs on her plate. The wrapping paper kept tearing, ripping, crackling. That sound again. It filled her ears like static, louder than the voices, louder than the music. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the hypocrisy. It was Evan's face, the confusion there. The way he was trying so hard to keep smiling, to stay polite, to pretend this was fine. That quiet, polite heartbreak. It hurt worse than any insult. Her mother's voice broke through again, light and airy. "Laura, did you end up finishing those cookies we loved last year?" She nodded. "They're the same ones." "Oh, how sweet." Mom lifted her champagne flute, then turned back to Megan. "You always go above and beyond for Christmas, dear." "You really do." Megan's smile was radiant. "Well, I just love seeing everyone happy." Laura pressed her napkin tighter in her hand. The edges tore a little under her fingers. The conversation drifted. The laughter swelled, and Laura sat there, holding her breath through it, that thin, invisible act of survival that only the polite ever master. When Mom stood to take a photo of the twins with their new watches, Laura smiled too, because that's what you do, she smiled, as if she were in on the joke, though it wasn't hers. The house was finally quiet. The kind of quiet that hums after company and small talk, like the air itself needed a moment to recover. Evan was asleep on the couch, still in his sweater, one hand resting on his stomach. The TV cast a faint blue glow across his face, the tail end of a Charlie Brown Christmas playing on low volume. His chest rose and fell, even steady. Laura sat beside him for a while, watching the animated snowflakes drift across the screen. Then she muted the sound and reached for her planner. It was an old habit, her end-of-day ritual. She'd always told herself that if she could keep track of the numbers, she could keep life from falling apart. She flipped it open to December. The pages were neat but crowded, scrawled notes, color-coded tabs, tiny reminders. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. A low battery warning. She ignored it, pulled her laptop closer, and logged into her bank account. The screen reflected off her glasses. A soft blue light in the dim living room, scrolling, scanning. Disney Plus, $14.99. She paused, remembering the text. "Mom, I tried to watch that new cooking show, but it says I need to log in again. You're better with computers. Can you fix it? Laura. Sure, just use my account. That was over a year ago. Somehow, the temporary fix had become permanent. She switched tabs. Spotify family, $12.99, 6 profiles. Only one was hers. She hovered her cursor over the user list. Evan, herself. Megan, Mom, Ryan, plus Chloe's mix, and an old profile still named Mark's Playlist. She smiled without humor. Guess they're still listening. Next, Amazon Prime renewal. Reminder, Jan 5, 130 nows, her chest tightened. Every year she told herself she'd cancel it. Every year she didn't, because Mom needed her vitamins next day and Megan ordered family stuff through it, and somehow those little conveniences became her responsibility. She scrolled further. Grocery transactions. Woodman's, 83.47. She clicked on the note field she'd added months ago. Mom's cereal, Megan's wine. That one made her pause longer than she wanted. It wasn't about the money. It was about the ease, the expectation that Laura would handle it. Always. She flipped back through older notes, tracing the history of her own quiet giving. August 14th. Vet payment. Megan's dog. 213 text. Can you spot me for the vet? Pay you Friday. No payment ever came. September 2nd. Mom's internet bill, $72. She forgot password again. October 10th. Ethan's school trip. No one offered to chip in. The pattern was so clear it almost mocked her. Every month had its own tiny sacrifices, so routine she'd stopped recognizing them as such. Laura rubbed her temple, her eyes burning a little from the light. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was awake. It felt like looking at her life through the lens of a bank statement, every line a small, quiet yes she'd given without being asked. Her planner lay open beside the laptop, the pen balanced diagonally across the page. She turned to a blank section labeled January Goals. Her handwriting, neat as always, filled the first line. Stop automatic renewals, Disney Plus, Spotify Prime. Then after a pause, she wrote another note in smaller letters. Boundaries are also a kind of love. The sound of the refrigerator hum filled the room. Somewhere outside, wind brushed against the siding. She glanced at the digital clock on the stove, 11:42 p.m. Laura reached for her phone, swiping open her messages. The familiar scroll of texts, proof of years of invisible giving. Megan. Hey, can you grab Mom's cake for her birthday? I'm running late. Mom. You're so good with tech. Can you add my shows to your Hulu? Megan. You're the organized one. Just order the decorations, I'll pay you back. She scrolled further, to one from last year. Mom. We're so lucky to have you. Laura, you just make everything work. That word, work, lingered. Yes, she made everything work. Because no one else bothered to. She clicked back to her bank screen, highlighting the last 3 months' transactions. She made a small spreadsheet, a private act of truth-telling. Netflix, $22.99. Her card. Family dinner takeout. $58. Her card. Grocery delivery to Mom's address. $94.60. Her card. She totaled it. $653.42. She sat back. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to sting. The house felt heavy now, that stillness after emotional noise. Her eyes drifted toward the mantel. Evan's Christmas stocking hung there, red felt, edges slightly frayed. Inside was only a single candy cane she'd slipped in before they left earlier that evening. She'd meant to add a few small things later, maybe a book, some chocolates. But now, seeing it empty like that, she felt the weight of every misplaced generosity. The twins had new Apple Watches. Her son had an empty stocking. Laura's throat tightened. She pressed her palm against the planner, the page still open to her list of renewals. Cancel. Cancel, cancel. She stared at the words for a long time, the quiet of the room wrapping around her like a thin blanket. For the first time, the thought didn't feel selfish. It felt sane. The clock ticked past midnight. Laura closed her laptop, the screen going black. Her reflection hovered there for a second, tired but resolute. She looked back once more at the stocking, its soft fabric catching a sliver of blue TV light. Then she whispered, not bitterly, but with something close to understanding, "Love shouldn't need a subscription." The house had gone still again, deeper than quiet, that heavy, suspended kind of silence that only arrives after midnight on Christmas. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows in slow, steady sighs. Snow hissed softly across the porch steps, whispering against the glass. The only light came from the laptop on the kitchen table, a cool blue pool that barely reached the corners of the room. Laura sat there in her robe, hair loose, a half glass of warm wine beside her. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. The cursor blinked on her email inbox like a pulse. Subject: Your Disney Plus. Subscription has been renewed. Date: December 24th, 11:09 p.m. She stared at it for a moment. Then she opened a new tab. Account: Manage subscription. Cancel. Her reflection flickered on the screen. Pale face, soft shadows under her eyes. She confirmed the cancellation, and a polite message appeared. "We're sorry to see you go. Laura, your access ends January 24th. A soft ping followed as the confirmation email arrived. It sounded like punctuation. She sipped her wine. It was too warm now, almost syrupy, but she didn't care. Next tab, Spotify. She'd done this before, hovered over the cancel button, second-guessed, backed away. Not tonight. Her mouse moved in slow, steady arcs. Cancel premium family plan, confirm, another ping. The refrigerator hummed, low and constant. Her fingertips had gone cold against the metal of the laptop, but she didn't stop. Hulu, Amazon Prime, Netflix. Each one required a password. Each one asked the same question, "Are you sure?" And for the first time, she was ping, ping, ping. She opened her planner and wrote it neatly in the corner of the day's box. Family subscriptions, canceled Deck 25. She stared at the words for a long time, tracing the curve of the C for years. She'd confused order with peace, thought that if she kept everything running, kept everyone comfortable, kept the machine humming, that was love. That was safety. But the truth was quieter than that. "I used to think peace meant everyone happy," she whispered into the stillness. "Tonight it just means quiet." She closed the planner, pressing her palm flat against the cover as if sealing it. A faint movement drew her gaze, the candle flickering beside the laptop, the one she'd lit earlier when she couldn't sleep. The wax had melted down one side, pooling near the base like a small white lake. The flame bent slightly in the draft from the vent. The light caught the laptop screen again. Her reflection, now doubled in the glass, one real, one digital. She studied herself for a moment. There was something new in her expression, not joy, not anger. Just stillness. She clicked open her email tab. The top line of her inbox now read, Disney Plus, confirmation, subscription canceled. Spotify, your premium family plan has been canceled. Amazon, Prime membership will end. John 5. 3 messages. Lined up in perfect order. She smiled faintly. The house creaked in the cold. Somewhere upstairs the furnace kicked on, a comforting sound. Laura took another slow sip of wine, then shut the laptop halfway, letting the glow dim. On the counter sat Evan's empty stocking from earlier, still folded neatly beside a note he'd written for Santa weeks ago. "I've been good this year. I just want Mom to be happy." She hadn't had the heart to throw it away. Her hand brushed the paper now, the corners soft from handling. She whispered, "I am, baby." "I'm getting there." Another gust of wind rattled the window, and she reached out, closing the laptop completely this time. The faint click of the lid echoed in the room, final and satisfying. Then she blew out the candle. the smoke curled up in slow gray ribbons, catching the faint glow from the laptop's dying light. She sat in the dark for a while, listening to the refrigerator hum, the snow against the window, her own steady breathing. The world outside could wait. Mom's calls, Megan's texts, the endless small requests dressed up as affection. They could all wait. For the first time, she didn't owe anyone tomorrow. The morning light crept in gray and thin, sliding across the kitchen floor. The house smelled faintly of coffee and sugar, the remnants of last night's cookies. Laura stood at the counter, mug in hand, letting the warmth soak into her fingers. The quiet was perfect. Then the phone began to buzz. She glanced at it where it sat beside the fruit bowl, screen lighting up, vibrating insistently against the counter. Mom, Netflix isn't working. Did you change something? A few seconds later, Megan. Wow, petty much? Laura took a slow sip of coffee. The clock on the microwave read 8:12 a.m. Buzz, Mom. It's Christmas week. Fix it. She stared at the words until the screen dimmed. The messages didn't surprise her. She'd been expecting them in some quiet way. The world rarely let go of its conveniences without complaint. She wiped a crumb from the counter and picked up her phone, not to reply but to delete the entire thread. One swipe, gone. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, but not unpleasant. Evan padded into the kitchen in his socks, rubbing his eyes. Morning, Mom, she smiled. Morning, sweetheart. Pancakes or toast? Toast, he said, yawning. The toaster clicked to life, orange glow reflecting on the counter. For a moment, everything looked normal again. Simple, ordinary. Her phone buzzed once more. She didn't even look this time. By noon, she needed milk, so she drove into town. The streets were wet with half-melted snow, slush gathering near the curbs. The grocery store parking lot was crowded, carts rolling through puddles, shoppers bundled in post-holiday exhaustion. Inside, the smell of coffee samples and pine-scented floor cleaner mingled together, familiar, comforting in its mundanity. She pushed her cart past a pyramid of discounted wrapping paper and paused at the cereal aisle. That's when she saw him, Megan's husband, Derek, comparing brands of almond milk. He looked up. Recognition flickered. Hey, he said after a beat, too casually. Hi. An awkward pause. He cleared his throat, glanced at her cart. Megan said the Netflix thing wasn't working. You know anything about that? His tone was polite, but defensive, like he already knew the answer and was hoping to pretend he didn't. Laura smiled lightly. I canceled it. Oh, he blinked. For everyone? For everyone who wasn't paying for it, she said, voice even, not sharp. He shifted his weight. Right, yeah, well, guess that makes sense. Then he pretended to check a label, eyes skimming over the box without reading it. Have a good day, Derek, she said softly, moving past him. He didn't reply. At checkout, the line was long. The hum of scanners, the rhythmic beep of items, the faint pop of grocery bags, all of it strangely hypnotic. When it was her turn, the cashier smiled automatically. Find everything okay? I did, thank you. The printer whirred, spitting out a long, curling receipt. The sound made her think of last night. The emails pinging one after another, proof that she'd finally stopped paying to be invisible. The receipt coiled into her hand, warm from the machine. She stared at it for a moment. Milk, bread, butter, nothing shared, nothing borrowed, her own balance sheet. Outside, the wind was sharper now. She loaded her bags into the trunk, her breath rising in white plumes. The phone buzzed in her coat pocket again. She didn't check it until she was sitting in the driver's seat. Heater running. Mom. This is ridiculous, Laura. Family doesn't act like this. Megan. You've embarrassed everyone. Over what? $10 a month? Then a final one from her mother, short and cold. Mom. You always were too sensitive. She exhaled slowly, reading that one twice. Then she powered the phone off. The screen went black. Her reflection appeared faintly, calm, unbothered. She rested her head against the seat, eyes closing for a moment. They'd rather borrow peace than earn it, she thought. Out of habit, she reached for the radio, then stopped. She didn't need noise. Instead, she listened to the wind outside, to the distant rumble of shopping carts, to her own steady breathing. When she opened her eyes again, the snow had started falling harder, thick, quiet flakes drifting across the windshield. She sat there for a long minute, watching the white blur against the gray sky, then turned the key. The car hummed to life, gentle heat rising through the vents. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she caught her own faint smile in the rearview mirror. Not triumphant, just at ease. It wasn't the silence of avoidance anymore. It was the silence of choosing, and it felt earned. Some silences aren't empty. They're earned. Snow pressed against the windows in soft drifts that afternoon, the kind that made the whole neighborhood look like a photograph. Quiet, colorless, suspended. Laura sat at her small desk by the window, laptop open, printer humming beside her. The rhythmic shuffle of paper coming through the tray was strangely soothing. Each sheet that slid out felt like a confession. Streaming services, one of $44 groceries, $312 phone plan, $768 miscellaneous transfers, $530. She stared at the totals, pen in hand, the numbers aligning like rows of small, polite ghosts. 1 year of invisible giving, 1 year of quiet depletion. The pages were warm when she touched them, the ink still faintly tacky. She reached for her red pen, not the blue one she used for work notes, but the red, the one she'd always reserved for corrections. She began circling. Slowly, one ring around Disney Plus, another around Wine Megan, then one more, darker around phone, family plan renewal. The color bled slightly into the paper, a thin halo of pink spreading from each circle. By the time she reached the last page, the sheet looked almost like an anatomy chart, arteries of red ink connecting each instance of generosity she'd pretended not to notice. She leaned back in her chair, exhaled. Her desk light flickered once, catching the faint glitter of snow outside. She opened her drawer and pulled out a small notebook, the one she used to track Evan's school reminders. On the first blank page, she wrote neatly at the top, Family Expenses, 2024. Then, below it, she added each total careful and deliberate, as though balancing an account that had long been overdrawn. Streaming, $1.44 groceries, $312 phone, $768 misc, $530. She underlined the final number twice. Total, $2,654. She stared at it for a long moment, the pen motionless in her hand. People say forgiveness frees you, she thought. But sometimes, math does. Each total was a story she could finally stop telling. Each dollar a piece of proof she no longer had to justify. For so long, her kindness had been invisible because it left no record. No one notices the absence of a bill, the silence of a paid subscription, the food that simply appears on the table. But here it was now, inked and undeniable. She could almost hear her mother's voice. Family doesn't keep score, Laura, and she would answer, quietly, maybe not. But family shouldn't take loans they never plan to repay. The printer beeped softly, its tray empty. She gathered the warm sheets, aligning their edges with her fingertips until the stack was crisp and even. The small mechanical neatness of it made her feel strangely peaceful, as if she were tidying her own mind. For a second, she imagined showing it to them, sliding the pages across the table, watching their eyes dart from line to line, excuses forming before they could speak, but she shook the thought away. This wasn't about confrontation anymore. This was about clarity, about finally being able to look at her life. Without owing anyone an apology for keeping track, she reached into the drawer, pulled out a manila folder and slid the stack of papers inside. Then she wrote across the front in block letters, the ledger, not proof. Not evidence. Just ledger. Because ledgers weren't about blame. They were about balance. She smoothed the folder flat with her palm and sat still for a moment. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the next room the only sound. It was strange how peace could look like this. Not joy, not triumph, but a simple absence of noise. The kind of silence that came after a long storm, when you finally stopped explaining why you stayed out in the rain. Outside, a plow passed slowly down the street, its amber lights flashing across the walls of her living room. Laura turned off the desk lamp, letting the gray light of the snow take its place. She opened the drawer again, placed the folder inside, and closed it gently. A small, final sound. She didn't need to show anyone the numbers. She didn't need to prove who had taken and who had given, because she knew. And that was enough. As she rose from the chair, she glanced back once more at the quiet printer, at the neat stack of canceled debts now tucked away. Her reflection caught faintly in the dark computer screen. Calm. A little older maybe, but lighter. She smiled softly to herself. I didn't need them to see the numbers, she whispered, reaching for her mug. I just needed to stop living in them. I didn't need them to see the numbers. I just needed to stop living in them. Snow fell again that night. Softer this time. Quieter, like the sky was whispering apologies for the week. The house was dim except for the amber glow of the kitchen light, spreading across the counter and pooling over the stack of dishes she hadn't yet bothered to wash. Laura stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker through the curtain of white. It had been 2 days since the messages stopped. 2 full days of silence. No more buzzing phone. No more guilt disguised as family duty. Just quiet. She had almost gotten used to it. Then a soft ding-dong. She froze. The sound felt strange, sudden, human. She wasn't expecting anyone. Another pause, then a light knock. Laura hesitated, then opened the door. There stood Marian, her neighbor from 2 houses down, bundled in a wool coat, snowflakes caught in her short silver hair. In her hands, a casserole dish wrapped in foil, steam fogging up her glasses. Evening, Marian said, smiling. Heard the family got loud. Laura blinked, startled into a small laugh. That obvious, huh? Marian tilted her head. You forget how thin these walls are. Sound carries. Laura flushed, embarrassed. I'm sorry. Oh, stop, Marian interrupted, waving her hand. You didn't do anything wrong. I just figured you might like something warm. She held up the dish. The foil was embossed with faint fingerprints, and the smell that drifted out was pure comfort. Chicken, cheese, maybe a hint of rosemary. Laura exhaled. You really shouldn't have. Sure I should, Marian said. That's what neighbors are for. Families forget that sometimes. There was a wry warmth in her tone, a shared understanding that didn't need explanation. Laura stepped aside. Come in for a minute? Marian shook her head. No. I just wanted to drop it off while it's still hot. You can return the dish whenever, or don't. I've got too many anyway. She placed the casserole on the counter, then patted Laura's arm gently. Before she turned to leave, she added, Oh, there's a note under the foil. Couldn't resist. With a mischievous smile, she stepped back into the snow, boots crunching softly. Laura watched her disappear down the walk, her coat a small gray blur against the white. For a long moment, she just stood there in the doorway, the cold air nipping at her cheeks. When she finally closed the door, the house felt warmer somehow, not because of the heat, but because of the gesture. She set the casserole on the table, unwrapped the foil, and saw the steam rise in slow curls, fogging the edge of her glasses. The smell filled the kitchen like a memory she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Then she noticed the note. Folded neatly, written in looping cursive on a piece of lined paper. They'll figure it out when the TV goes dark. Laura laughed, really laughed, for the first time all week. It startled her, the sound of it, light and real and unguarded. She leaned on the counter, shaking her head. Oh, Marian, she whispered. Evan came into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. What's funny? Nothing, she said, smiling. Just good timing. He looked at the dish. That smells amazing. It does, she agreed. They ate together at the table, steam rising between them. It wasn't fancy, just chicken, noodles, and a sauce that tasted like something from another decade, rich and grounding. But it filled the space in a way that felt bigger than food. Halfway through, Evan said quietly, "Grandma still mad?" Laura hesitated. "Maybe, but that's okay." He poked at his noodles. "We're not going over there again, are we?" "Not for a while." He nodded, accepting it with the easy wisdom of a child who's seen too much pretending. When they finished, Laura wrapped the leftovers, labeled the container with a strip of masking tape. "Marion, thank you." Then she paused, smiled, and added a small heart beside the name. She rinsed the plates and looked again at the casserole dish. The foil crinkled now. The note resting on top, outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the street, muffling every sound. For the first time in days, the house didn't feel lonely. It felt still, and stillness, she realized, could sometimes be another kind of company. She poured a little more wine, sat at the table again, and reread the note. They'll figure it out when the TV goes dark. Her laughter this time was quieter, softer, but it lingered longer. She touched the edge of the paper with her fingertip, as if to thank it for existing. The casserole's warmth still hung in the air, a faint shimmer of heat that smelled like forgiveness, or maybe just kindness without conditions. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed it in. Not all gifts come wrapped. Some just arrive on time, the morning. Light was sharp and clear, the kind that made the snow outside look almost metallic. It was December 30th, just before noon. The world was quiet again. Laura sat at her desk, the same place where she'd tallied her family's debts a few days earlier. The manila folder labeled the ledger still sat in the drawer beneath her hand, but she didn't need to open it. She already knew every number by heart. Her phone buzzed once, a calendar reminder. New Year's brunch, Megan's, 10 a.m. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then swiped it away. The phone stayed in her hand. The group chat icon hovered there, family. The red heart suddenly looking out of place, like a sticker that had outlived its meaning. She opened the chat. The last messages were still there. Mom's half-accusations, Megan's passive-aggressive digs, then nothing. A digital stalemate. Laura took a slow breath. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a moment, she imagined not writing anything at all, just leaving it empty, ghosting them all in the same silence they used to keep her small. But that wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to end it clean. She began to type. "I'll be keeping my own accounts from now on. I wish you all a peaceful new year." She reread it twice. It looked too short for what it meant, but that was the point. No apologies, no explanations, just a boundary. Written plain. She hit send. The message appeared in the chat, small and gray, beneath her name. The typing bubble flickered almost immediately. First, Mom, this isn't what family does. Then Megan, so dramatic. Overstreaming? Another from Mom. You're making a scene, Laura. We all depend on each other. That's how it works. The messages came fast. That familiar tone of guilt wearing the mask of reason. Laura watched the screen quietly, her thumb resting above the keyboard. She didn't type anything back. The phone buzzed again, one last time. Then she tapped the top of the chat and pressed mute notifications. The tiny crossed-out bell icon appeared beside the thread. Small, simple, perfect. The phone went still in her palm. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to defend her silence. She placed the phone face down on the desk and turned toward the window. Outside, the world looked washed clean. White roofs, glittering driveways, the kind of brightness that made you squint. They'd taught me to serve in silence, she thought. Now I was teaching them to listen in it. The quiet filled the house like something solid. She turned back to her desk. The folder sat there, a faint crease on its corner from where she'd handled it so often. She opened her laptop, navigated to her desktop screen, and found the folder named Family. Inside, subfolders for each subscription, each grocery list, each payment record. Every trace of the life she'd been holding together for everyone else. She highlighted the entire folder. Right-clicked, delete, a small chime. The files disappeared into the digital void. The screen dimmed slightly, blank, unburdened. Laura closed the laptop and took a sip of the coffee she'd forgotten beside her. It was cold now, but it didn't matter. She stood and began tidying her desk. The printer paper stacked neatly, the pens capped and aligned, a clean notepad placed square in the center. On its first page, she wrote only 2 words in neat dark ink. Next year, no budget. No debts, no running tally of who owed what. Just a blank page waiting for something that was hers. She leaned back in her chair and listened. Somewhere outside, faint but clear, the church bells began to ring, slow, steady, echoing through the frozen air. It was the sound of time passing, indifferent and beautiful. She thought of her mother, her sister, their noise and need. For years, she'd confused their chaos with connection, but now she could hear the difference. This silence was peace, not absence. Laura picked up her phone again, not to check messages, but to set an alarm. New Year's morning, walk at 8 a.m. The simple act felt like reclaiming a tiny piece of her life. She glanced once more at the muted chat. The tiny gray text, "You muted this conversation," stared back like a soft, final punctuation mark. The phone buzzed once, briefly, a new message, unseen. She didn't turn it over. Outside, the bells kept ringing, each one fading into the next. Clean and unhurried, she smiled faintly. The kind of smile that comes from the inside first. Some endings ring like beginnings. Quiet. "Certain overdue," Snow whispered against the kitchen window, brushing the glass like a secret trying to be told. The house smelled faintly of rosemary and something baked. Marion's casserole, reheated and bubbling in the old glass dish Laura had nearly forgotten she owned. The lights were low. Only a single candle flickered between 2 mismatched plates. One blue with a chipped edge, one plain white. Across from her, Evan's hair stuck up in every direction, his face lit soft by the candle's sway. He forked at the casserole for a moment before glancing up. "Mom," he asked carefully, "are they mad at you?" Laura paused mid-bite, the question landing with more grace than accusation. Kids had a way of asking truth like it was just another piece of the puzzle. She set her fork down and leaned back. "Probably," she said, voice even. "But they'll live." Evan nodded, like that answer was enough. He chewed thoughtfully, his small shoulders easing. Outside, the snow thickened, turning the world beyond their window into a blur of white and faint gold light. After a moment, he spoke again. "Can we still do our Christmas tomorrow?" Laura smiled. "Our kind, yes." Evan grinned, and for the first time in days, she saw the boy who used to make paper snowflakes and tape them all over the fridge. They finished eating quietly, not the awkward silence of anger, but the soft kind that fills up a home when no one needs to prove anything. When the plates were cleared, Laura turned to the counter. "You want to help me with dessert? Cookies?" he guessed, already standing. "Cookies," she said. They moved easily together, butter, sugar, flour. The rhythm came back like muscle memory, their shared language of measuring cups and wooden spoons. The kitchen warmed with the smell of vanilla and cinnamon. The radio stayed off. The only sounds were the scrape of the spoon against the bowl, the steady hum of the oven, and Evan's quiet humming. A tune from one of those Christmas specials they used to watch before the subscriptions ran out. When the cookies were in the oven, Evan disappeared for a minute and returned with a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table to her without saying anything. Laura wiped her hands on a dish towel before opening it. It was a drawing, marker lines uneven, bright and honest. Her and Evan side by side at the kitchen table, a little candle drawn between them. Above it, in bold letters that leaned like they were reaching for something, he'd written, "Just us." Laura felt something rise in her chest. Not sorrow exactly, but a loosening. She reached across the table and brushed a hand over his. "That's perfect," she said softly. He shrugged like it was no big deal, but the faint smile on his lips gave him away. When the oven timer dinged, the sound was gentle, almost shy. Laura pulled the tray from the oven. Golden edges, soft centers, small cracks where the heat had kissed them just right. She placed the tray on the counter, and the smell filled every quiet space in the house. They waited, just standing there together, watching the cookies cool. Evan broke one open and handed half to her. "You have to try it now," he insisted. She took a bite. Sweet, warm, imperfect, just like the evening. They ate in companionable silence, sitting back at the table, candlelight flickering between them again. Laura's mind wandered to all the nights she'd sat in that same chair balancing numbers, tracking everyone's needs but her own. Tonight, the table felt lighter, the math simpler. 2 plates. 2 people. Full hearts. Evan leaned his chin on his hand. "Can we do this every year?" he asked. "What's that?" "Just us Christmas. No fighting." "No yelling," Laura smiled. "I think that's the best kind." He nodded, satisfied, and reached for another cookie. The wind pressed gently against the house, but the walls felt solid. The candle flickered, steady and gold. For a long time, they didn't talk. They didn't need to. The quiet between them had shape and warmth now, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and endless. Laura glanced toward the empty living room. No flashing screens, no buzzing phone, no half-heard arguments in group chats. Just the hum of the heater and the heartbeat of the house. She looked back at Evan. He was doodling again on the same paper, adding snowflakes around their drawn figures. Her chest tightened. That small ache of gratitude you feel when something broken quietly mends. "Hey," she said softly. "Thanks for dinner." He grinned, crumbs on his chin. "You made it." She shook her head. "No," she said. "You made it better." The oven light clicked off. The last candle flame leaned sideways, shrinking into a tiny ember before disappearing completely. The house settled into darkness. Gentle, complete. For the first time all week, Laura didn't mind the quiet. The house felt smaller that night, and just right. The world had shifted into January's hush, the kind that comes after the glitter fades and the air feels honest again. Snow lay heavy on the lawns, softening the shapes of mailboxes and cars, turning everything into quiet sculpture. Laura sat at her kitchen table, the same one where she and Evan had shared cookies and laughter only days ago. A cup of coffee steamed beside her open planner. The pages were crisp and mostly empty, a small mercy of possibility. She flipped to a clean sheet and uncapped her pen. In neat, deliberate handwriting, she wrote, "Subscriptions canceled." She paused, then added the date. Beneath it, a small note. "Kept peace instead." Her eyes drifted toward the drawer beside her desk, the one holding the manila folder. It sat there quietly, sealed, untouched since the night she made it. She reached for the handle, then stopped halfway. It didn't call to her like it once had. There was a time she'd have needed to look again, to re-feel every number and reminder of how small she'd allowed herself to become. Now she didn't need proof. The quiet was proof enough. Still, she opened the drawer just a little. The folder waited, simple and unassuming, its corner catching the light. She considered taking it out, maybe even burning it. Watching it curl and vanish might have been satisfying once, but not anymore. Letting go didn't have to mean erasing. Sometimes keeping the evidence was its own kind of peace, a monument to a line finally drawn. She shut the drawer gently. Outside, wind whispered through the eaves. The house was warm, but she felt the tug of the air beyond the window, clean, cold, unclaimed. She pulled on her coat and stepped outside. The cold met her instantly, catching in her throat, turning her breath to mist. The snow under her boots gave a small, satisfying crunch, the sound of something solid underfoot. It was early evening, the hour when the neighborhood lights began to blink alive one by one. Gold squares glowed in distant windows. Other families gathered around dinners, TVs, laughter. Laura watched them without envy, only understanding she wasn't angry anymore. Just awake. The sky above was a deep, forgiving gray, the same kind of sky that had hung over her on Christmas Eve when she'd tied ribbons around cookie plates and tried to make peace out of sugar. A faint movement caught her eye, something fluttering down the street. At first, she thought it was a piece of paper, but as it came closer, the wind caught it again, and she saw the shimmer of satin, a ribbon, pale gold, the same color she'd used that night, the same one she'd tied, neatly, hopefully, around plates no one really wanted. It twisted through the air like something free at last, looping and dancing in the wind before catching on a bare branch near the curb. Laura smiled. Not a wide smile, but the quiet kind that reaches the eyes. She walked toward it slowly, hands tucked in her coat pockets. When she reached the branch, she touched the ribbon lightly. The satin was cold, the knot loose. It would blow away again soon. She didn't take it. Some things were meant to stay untied. She turned back toward her house, its single-lit window glowing soft against the snow. Through it, she could see the faint outline of Evan moving in the kitchen, setting the table, maybe sneaking another cookie. The sight warmed her from the inside out. Families don't break in a single day, she thought. They fade, bill by bill, favor by favor, until the person who gave the most realizes she's empty. It wasn't anger that had made her stop. It was the quiet recognition that she'd been trading her own joy for someone else's comfort, and the world hadn't fallen apart without her constant yes. Inside, the clock ticked faintly. The kind of ticking that once felt lonely now just sounded like time doing what it was supposed to. Moving forward. Laura took one last look at the ribbon fluttering in the wind, then turned back toward the door. She stepped inside, the warmth meeting her like a familiar friend. The air smelled faintly of sugar and pine from the small candle Evan had lit. She hung her coat, brushed melting snow from her shoulders, and exhaled slowly. The house was quiet again, but not the kind of quiet that pressed against her chest. This was a full quiet, a peaceful one, the kind that made space for new laughter, new rules, new beginnings. She glanced at the planner still open on the table, the ink drying beside her last note. Beneath subscriptions canceled, she added one final line. Permission. Granted. She didn't write to whom. She didn't need to. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying the ribbon higher this time until it vanished into the dark. Laura watched from the window for a long moment, her breath fogging the glass. Then she smiled, the kind that didn't ask for anyone's approval. This year, the only thing I gave was permission for them to miss me.